Today I received an ad on YouTube by a local news station claiming to give me the brute, hard, solid facts. Independent of the biases of corporations, they were going to give me what really mattered. Not only am I skeptical of such rhetoric, but honestly, it kind of disgusts me because it does something from the center of power, which is a news station. It claims to be able to deliver knowledge that is apolitical. And I think this is a profound misstep. Through the philosophy of James Joyce and Michel Foucault, I would like to discuss today how all knowledge is political. How there is no such thing as the bare facts untainted by power. James Joyce says in Finnegan's Wake, every telling has a tailing. What this means is that every telling of facts, on the one hand, every tabulation of empirical matters of fact, is bound up with the way it is told. It is telling a tale about these facts. It must be put in a concrete order, delivered to us through a medium, and given to us in a way that makes sense. All of this means that the difference between telling and tailing becomes blurred, such that they might as well be a common project of fabulation, as Deleuze put it. That central to our knowledge-making capacities is that knowledge is produced, and it is thus produced in a political and cultural and historical context, and therefore it is fabulated. It is in part fictive, tied up with narrative and coherence. Because if we look at the criteria for objective knowledge in the history of philosophy, it has to be rational. This is the chief concern. Can it be achieved through the synthesis of particular parts of a syllogism, right? Can we take individual terms which can be rationally and discretely known and compute them together? Can we start from first principles and yield a synthetic account of knowledge? We go from the particular to the general using general axioms, right? These are rules of logic of the way we can compute together knowledge. Now, one of the things that the pragmatists come on the scene and say is actually no. The chief governing concern for knowledge is not rationality or truth in some sort of transcendent way. Rather, it is coherence. The ability for a number of beliefs that we have to come into confluence and form a coherent web, a coherent picture. This is what Charles S. Peirce says in his How to Make Our Ideas Clear. He says that every time we have a belief, we don't really know it until we come up with a recalcitrant experience, something that challenges that belief and forces us to examine it. Rationally, or even just kind of defensively, habitually, we try to correct for it. We try to get rid of the outside influence of the world so that we're whole again. And the criteria by which we get rid of this recalcitrant experience is when it is coherently absorbed into our web of beliefs, such that they're not even like rational beliefs at all. They're more like habits that we have, that we can forget about and put on the back burner. And all of this shows us that there is a shift away from seeing knowledge as some sort of transcendent phenomenon to seeing it as a socially embodied process whose chief goal is coherence, order. Max Weber shows how there is a rationalization process that occurs in the history of society, of thought, that takes complex things and tries to break them down, rationalize them, and thereby integrate them into a system, which for Weber is exemplified and typified by capitalism. This is an example of this coherentizing force at work. And this is primarily, for our purposes, political. What it does is it shows us that the undercurrent of truth is always a process of power. Michel Foucault wants to show how All knowledge is constrained by and filtered through discourse. As James Joyce once again puts it in Finnegan's Wake, we are always in medias res, which is a play on in medias res, in the middle of things in Latin, but also in the reeds of, in the midst of media, of mediation. That we are always acting through some instrument, and we are always secondary to some outside instrument by which we have received the information we have. News is a perfect example of this. We are inundated by news sources, and for example, when the new pope has just been elected, and you're trying to figure out information about him. Is he some woke Marxist pope, or is he just kind of a run-of-the-mill centrist? You're trying to find out objective information about him. There are lots of different places you can go, and you're trying to figure out, where can I go to get the truth? But in part, and we know this based on how algorithms work and whatnot, we also go for coherence, to get our presuppositions not too messed up. We want them to be selected in a way that reassures us that we have the right presuppositions. So knowledge is in part already working off of terms that have been selected, right? The presuppositions and biases we already have before we start our search for knowledge, rational or non-rational. Whether we're kind of objectively trying to find out, okay, what are the first principles of the ideology of this pope? Or whether or not you're just kind of casually doing a search, you're not really engaged in any sort of rational process, formally speaking. Regardless, there are terms that already exist, and these terms have been selected on the basis of power. So think about the terms upon which one identifies oneself. You have your height, for example, and you know your height based off of the terms of measurements, and these measurements are the result of applying basic units to your empirical stuff. And those units have already been decided. Is it the imperial or the metric system? That is a consequence of power. Think about some of the terms you use to talk about your identity. For example, your gender. I am a man. There are a whole panoply of assumptions that power has already decided, that the family has already decided, which of course is its separate institution of power. Religion also is part of this. All of these are terms that have already been decided, at least in part. They're kind of ready-made matrices for us to identify what it means to know something about oneself, about the world in which one lives, and the facts that one is trying to ascertain. And as such, as we're doing this process of telling facts about the world, and telling is in fact an action, we act into the world in such a way in which we tell a tale, in which we spin certain ways in which we would like the world to be, and we in part construct our knowledge as we seek it. Because we are constructing, in the process of going to get information, an integrative web. As we take knowledge from the world and we integrate it into our knowledge base, right? And Michel Foucault wants to show that the very terms upon which we can search for knowledge are essentially political. That in any discourse, such as a familial or a academic discourse, there are certain acceptable terms for what it means to say you know something. For example, to say that a family member loves you. There are certain kind of expected ways in which you can signal to someone that you can love them, and that you do love them, and that you can know that someone else loves you. There are actions that you can do, signals that you can send, and the same thing in an academic context. There are ways of communicating. There are ways of presenting oneself and of speaking that signals that you belong in that discourse and that you know what you're talking about, and that you can say you know something about something inside this discourse. And each discourse, Foucault wants to say, has its own rules. It has its own rules of the road, just as every road has its own rule of the road that will depend on the country that you're in. And within these discourses, the context acts in a constraining way, for one, because it restricts the kind of knowledge that you can have. but also, more importantly, it acts in a productive way. It creates knowledge which was not there before. Let's continue with this road analogy. If we want to talk about knowing things about the road, can we really talk about, there being rules before we implemented those rules? No. And if I want to say that I know something about, for example, a local intersection, right outside my house, a component part of that is knowing the rules that apply to it right now. And those rules did not apply to it at a past point before the road was constructed, before the laws were put in place, such that the implementation of knowledge is a political act of power before which there was no knowledge. So power is concurrent with, and perhaps before, knowledge. And knowledge is an after effect of power, of its being, as Deleuze and Guattari would put it, territorialized. Right? It accretes. It becomes a sort of central node around which a whole solar system and panoply of ideas and ways of being come to form. This creates not only an institution, but an institutional apparatus that creates a social fabric. As such, the very sociality of humans is tied up in politics. Politics being the negotiation of power. So the very ability for me to talk about, for example, the facts of the day that this news station is trying to tell me, the very means by which I can do that is language. And the terms upon which my language functions have already been decided by my forefathers and my forefathers' forefathers, etc., etc., and my foremothers and my foremothers' mothers. As such, I don't really decide the terms upon which my knowledge is based. And Foucault wants to argue that this is in part a bad thing and in part a neutral thing. It's neutral because this is just a precondition for knowledge of any kind, and knowledge can be useful for good or for bad. But also this is bad because it constrains minor knowledges from being able to appear on the scene. A good example of this, for example, is Palestinian journalists right now who want to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict and want to be critical towards the state of Israel. Well, you're going to run into an issue, which is that a lot of the mainstream news places are governed in such a way that they don't want to hear about the Middle East. They only want to hear about the Middle East as an instrument of American imperialism and American interests because they are American companies, right? So this is an example of power constraining the types of knowledge that can come onto the scene. The media by which we are allowed to be in medias res in the first place. The fact that you're able to see this video means that the stuff presented in this video is not copyright, that it doesn't violate any of YouTube's policies, that it is a length and format that can be featured on YouTube. There are a number of constraining factors that allow you to have this media right now. So all of this to say, knowledge is always political. And the feminists, for example, have elaborated a system in which, as they say, the personal is political. Because we tend to have this idea that the political is the stuff out there that happens in the White House, right? Or that happens in Parliament. It's the stuff that happens in those centralized institutions. But Foucault wants to point out that, in fact, politics works by diffusing itself throughout the entirety of society, such that, for example, not only is it coding the sort of environment in which we live, it's coding the body and what it means to know one's body, what we consider as essential facts about the body. Think about the arguments over when does a fetus become a person, or is a fetus a person? Or think about disabled rights of what are essential parts of our bodies that the government feels that they need to accommodate, right? All of this stuff about knowing my body is tied up in a political landscape, in a political milieu and context that constrains the kinds of ways that I can interact with my own body. And deeper than that, Foucault wants to say that politics invades and codes and in fact codifies and creates the soul itself, what it means to have a soul, which has long been associated with, for example, only certain organisms have souls, and those are the ones that are ethically worthwhile, and the ones that don't, well, we can do what we like with them. So this leads to, for example, abandoning the environment to our detriment and abandoning other species to our and their detriment. So as such, this is tied up in a political ideology of what does it mean to be essentially human? How can we ostracize madmen, as Foucault wants to show in Madness and Civilization? So the very idea of knowing oneself is tied up with knowing the terms upon which one can know oneself, which have already been decided on the basis of power, on the basis of discursive activities, strategies, and tools which work sometimes to one's benefit if you're in a very successful group, or if you're in a marginalized group, it may work to your detriment. So the feminists want to say that the personal is political, that the things that we tend to think, such as like domestic labor, right, like doing the dishes or the laundry or caring for the kids at home, that has not even been historically seen as labor, and thus as something that needs to figure into the economy, and thus politics needs to concern itself with. That hasn't historically been the case. It's just been seen as something that the women are supposed to do, and not something that they should be accommodated for and compensated for, because it's not labor at all. It's just, we don't even really have a formal term for it. But labor, when the men go out and labor, yes, that is something that it is their duty to do, and it is the government or the company's obligation to make sure that they are compensated as such. And the feminists want to say, no, in fact, if us women, if we want to start getting paid for and paid in the amount that we should get paid, we need to realize that this personal stuff, in fact, has political bearings, and there are reasons why this personal stuff is being ignored to us, to women's detriment. So this just adds to this fact that all knowledge is political, that the knowledge of the domestic and the familial scene is tied up with a whole series of political expectations and constraints. So I want you to go away with this knowing that, in a sense, there are no such thing as the bare facts, unbiased facts. We know this. If you are in a high school English class, you will probably be taught how to look for proper sources and how to minimize bias, not to eliminate bias, because this is also something that everyone is taught. Everybody has bias, and especially the people who claim that they don't. That's why I am so critical of the sort of rhetoric of this news station that I began this lecture with. And I think you should too. I think you should be very wary in this digital age of people who claim to be without bias, people who claim to be apolitical. The people who claim to be apolitical are probably the most they are the people who fall prey the most to politics. The people who say that they are centrists or politically aloof and they don't have anything to do with politics. Those are the people that are falling prey to the politicians the most. And those are the people that need to be educated the most about how all knowledge is political. So that being said, that's it for this lecture. I hope it's been somewhat interesting. You can check out any of my other lectures I've done on postmodernism, German idealism, gender theory, post-colonial studies, and other literature. You can also become a channel member for $5 a month and gain access to, among other things, a private philosophy Zoom, which I do the second Sunday of every month. I can help with any reading trouble you have, or questions or concerns or quips or queries. I also have super thanks if you'd just like to donate one time to the channel, because books are rather expensive and I appreciate anything that anyone gives, but no pressure. Care about yourself first. That is it for this lecture, and I will see you in another one.